Welcome everyone. Recognize quite a few familiar names and look forward to having some good discussion with folks that I don't know. And yeah, I'd like to also on tonight we have the Northwest Tax Law team leader Keith Krajewski is also going to be joining us. Keith is the supervisor of the Northwest Tax Law team, which I'm a part of, which basically encompasses everything from Ashland down to Trempealeau counties and everything west, which is about 17 counties. And that also fits pretty closely with Lauren's territory as well, which she covers. So welcome everyone. I'm going to turn my video off and start sharing the screen here. All right. Can everybody see that? Is that on, Lauren? Is that looking good? All right. So what we're going to talk about tonight, the main things we want to talk about is basically the steps that you need to do to complete your mandatory harvest. We're going to talk about where to locate the forestry professionals that can assist with this. We're going to talk about the different roles that each of the people involved play. We're going to talk about some keys to a successful timber harvest. And then lastly, we're going to go through where you can find some more in-depth information regarding timber sales and timber sale contracts. So these things do take time. Many of you have just received either your first letter or potentially your second practice due letter. So when you look at where we're at and basically what the expectation is, basically we want to keep things moving forward and show that we're moving to get these things done. As I mentioned, we all realize these things do take time. Typically 2 to 3 years isn't that uncommon from when you get this first letter, kind of starting the process to actually seeing that all the way through and completed. There's a lot of wild cards with logging, weather, logger availability, markets, and we understand that. So the main thing is that you're staying, the main thing to stay in compliance is you keep things moving forward and trying to get this practice accomplished. So if we look, basically many of you on this meeting are right here. You just received this letter, you have a practice due, and basically the next step where we want to get to is getting services accepted. What we mean by that is getting either a service agreement or timber sale contract in place with a forestry professional. After that happens, it's good to notify your tax law forestry specialist in the appropriate counties and let them know that you have services accepted, because then they can move you from that practice due list and mark you down as having services accepted. The next step, should just back up here real quick. The next step after having services accepted is we do want to get a cutting notice in place. And once we get a cutting notice in place, that's really when the job becomes active. So that's something that working with a forestry professional that can help you get that cutting notice in place. We got to have a cutting notice in place and plugged into the system before any logging can happen. And then lastly is just filing the cutting report, basically the volumes that were harvested by species and product. And I'll show you an example form of that later on in this presentation. So step one, find your MFL plan and review it. For any of you that do not have a copy of your MFL plan, definitely let me know. You can either respond in the chat box or email me afterwards. I'd be happy to get you a copy of that. But very important to review your plan. Maybe maybe even take a walk through the property yourself if you have interest in that, looking at what's being prescribed, and really see if that's still what fits your goals and objectives, and what you want to see done on the property. We do realize that many a times these lands were already enrolled in the program, perhaps before you purchased it, and so maybe your goals and objectives are different than the previous owner. So good idea to go through that, kind of review everything, and really step one is just looking over that. Also, having your plan handy will be helpful for any forestry professional that you're working with. That would be helpful for them to see that, so they have a map and kind of know what they're looking at when they come out. But this really keeps us on task, and helps us manage and the property, and it's easy to become complacent when we don't have a plan. So that's really the importance of having it as just a basic roadmap to keep us on task and notify us when management is needed. So why do we need to do a timber sale? Well, many of you are enrolled in the managed forest law or forest crop law programs, and this is part of your obligation being in the program. Actually, right in state statute, the production of future forest crops is part of the state statute. So this is a very important part of the program, and it really does support our forest industry in the state of Wisconsin, which is number 2 to agriculture in our economy in the state. So it does play a very big role keeping the wood products on the market, keeping our forest industry strong in the state. So and then also, the other reasons why we harvest is just keeping things healthy and sustainable. Harvesting overstock trees, mature trees, keeping everything, and that is the ultimate goal, is healthy, sustainable forests for the future. Benefits of a timber harvest, many benefits included, obviously income from the timber sales. In many cases, there is some income to be generated for the landowner. And in some cases, in particular here in western Wisconsin, we do struggle getting some of these smaller jobs completed, and it may not be a lot of revenue, or may even be a break-even deal, but in many cases there is some income to be generated. Wildlife management and forestry really go hand in hand. So it in many ways improves wildlife habitat for all different critters of wildlife. So doing forestry definitely enhances that, and also just access to the property. Think of logging roads, walking trails. Really does improve the recreational opportunities on the property, and aesthetics, improving aesthetics. Cleaning up the dead, downed, diseased trees, keeping trees healthy, vigorous, young forests. Definitely makes it more aesthetically pleasing. So step 2. So first you found your plan. Step 2, really suggest working with a cooperating forester. Cooperating foresters signed an agreement with the state of Wisconsin to practice sound forest management on MFL and non-MFL lands. And these folks really are beneficial to landowners in completing sound forestry. They do have annual requirements to the state. They have to do continuing education credits. They do have to file stumpage value reports and accomplishment reports with the DNR. But yeah, both industrial and private foresters can be in this group of cooperating foresters, but really can help you get your timber sale established. Going through all the paperwork, as I mentioned before, the MFL cutting notices, filing the reports, finding the contractors to do the job, and writing those timber sale contracts, getting that in writing. And probably the most important, one of the most important things is the on-site administration, actually being out on the job while things are getting cut. This is where, it's very important to have some eyes on the ground and make sure everything's being implemented properly, and catch anything, if there are any issues, trying to catch those early on rather than waiting till the end of the project. Cooperating foresters can also ground truth your practice, which is a good idea to get somebody out to look at your practice. I mentioned before, feel free to walk out there yourself, look at it, get your thoughts on it, but also to have a professional forester come out and look to make sure, in fact, that what's being scheduled is in fact still needed on the ground. So where do you find the forestry, cooperating foresters and other foresters for that matter? On the Wisconsin DNR website, if you look on the top of this site here, there's a link to this site. There's a forestry assistance locator. This tool is very handy for finding foresters throughout the state. You simply scroll down to the county that your land is located, and then you can select the forester type. Down below, you'll see there is a cooperating forester tab and also a DNR tax law forestry specialist as well. So very useful when looking for cooperating foresters. You can even go further down and query through what services the cooperating foresters provide. For example, if you were looking for a certified plan writer to write an MFL plan, there is a tab underneath the cooperating forester tab where you could click just certified plan writers, and then that would pull up all the foresters that have those credentials to write a MFL plan for you. So very good tool for finding cooperating foresters and tax law foresters throughout the state. So sustainable forest management really does rest on a three-legged stool, between the landowner, the timber producer, so the actual logger, timber producer out implementing the practice, and then the forestry professionals that are helping assist with the sale and get everything taken care of. Communication between all three of these is vital, and if any of these are missing, whereas one of these isn't in the loop on what's going on, is really when troubles can arise. So really keeping the open communication between all three, the landowner, the timber producer, forestry professionals, all being on the same page so everybody knows what's going on, really does set yourself up for a successful timber sale. So landowners' roles, I've kind of alluded to some of this already with talking about the continuum of remaining in compliance and what you need to do, but really the staying on task and timely establishment of the mandatory practices is a crucial role of the landowner. Really, we should strive to have services accepted within the year the practice is scheduled. So there again, what I mean by that, having a service agreement or timber sale contract in place before, no later than the year that practice was scheduled. And then really the landowner's responsibility is ensuring that the county cutting notices and Wisconsin DNR cutting notices are filed before any logging starts. Here again, working with a cooperating forester, forestry professional, they can help assist with this paperwork. And then really making sure that the practices are being implemented as prescribed on that cutting notice and the plan. It really does come back on the landowner. So if there are any issues with the sale and what's done, that would come back on the landowner. So that's the importance also of having a contract in place to protect yourself and ensure that things are being implemented properly. And then lastly, as I mentioned, filing the volumes that were cut. And this really notifies the tax law forestry specialist that the sale is completed and everything can be closed out MFL plan updated at that point. So timber producers' roles. This really is where the rubber meets the road. These are the folks that are out actually implementing the practice, and this really can be where a lot of the troubles can happen as well. So it's very important that the timber producers are implementing the practice properly and fulfilling the MFL management plan, and really making sure. The other thing too is making sure we have the right timber producer on the right project, the right equipment mix on the right job. There's all kinds of different pieces of logging equipment and stuff, and really trying to make sure we have a good fit and a good producer that can complete the practice as prescribed. Here again, this is where having a cooperating forester or forestry professional can really help pick that right person and make sure that we get the job done properly. And then administration, checking on these jobs while they're active. You definitely want to give these folks space when they're out there operating. At the same time, it is good to show some presence, being out there checking on things and making sure things are being done properly. I mentioned this multiple times too, getting something in writing. Step 3 really is good to have a good service agreement and timber sale contract to both get these in writing. It really holds folks more accountable when stuff is in writing. Not to say a verbal contract can't be done, but when you have something in writing with a start date, end date, it just seems to keep people more accountable and keep things moving forward. So definitely suggest getting something in writing. Another important thing with the contracts is keep in mind if there is a breach in the contract in any way, you can shut down that operation until things are satisfied. And really, this is important too, to not only have a good contract, but make sure all parties are following that contract, because as I mentioned earlier, it's easier to fix problems when they're small, when the equipment is still on the job, rather than waiting till the end and when stuff may have snowballed and potentially the logger is not on the job anymore, trying to get someone back. So just mention that. Very important not only to have a good contract, but also make sure all parties are following it. At the end, towards the end of this presentation, I will go through, there's some really good UW extension information on timber sale contracts and there's a link that will go send you to the UW extension website to explore more of this timber sale contract information. But a lot of information, and it is really good to get make sure you get something in writing. Also, I believe Lauren sent you, there is a UW extension and WOA sample contract that was sent out as a handout. That's a good starting point, a good tool to start with when it comes to timber sale contracts. So step 4, contact your tax law forestry specialist. This would be myself and others throughout the state. Really our role is to help educate you to make informed decisions, and this really is more of a facilitative role, and we're here to help in this process. We're not out doing the implementation of the practice, marking the timber or any of that, but we can really help get that information to you so you can make an informed decision. We also review the cutting notices and reports. We monitor some of the active sales and some of the recently harvested timber sales. I will note on here that when we monitor sales, there is a fine line as far as getting into sale administration. We, as DNR foresters, cannot get into administrating contracts and such. And there again, that's where having a cooperating forester working as your agent can really help with that. But we do look to make sure that the practices were implemented properly. Sometimes this is after the sale, months after. And then we also get involved assisting forestry professionals and timber producers when there's questions. Sometimes we have management questions that pop up or other things that arise, and really working together with our partners and putting our heads together, make sure everyone's on the same page, and really is a role that we play. So as I mentioned before, if any of you are in other counties outside of Dunn, St. Croix, Pierce, definitely get to know your tax law forestry specialist. And if you don't know who that is, go to the Forestry Assistance Locator and type in your county, and you can find out who that forester is. But anytime, along this process, feel free to reach out to myself or other tax law forestry specialists throughout the state to get your questions answered. So step 5, filing the MFL cutting notice and the county cutting notice. The county cutting notice is on the left-hand picture here, probably pretty small for most of you see it. Really simple on this. Basically, it's just the legal description, landowner's name, PIN number. Basically, all the county notice is checking is make sure that there aren't any delinquent taxes on the land. So that's a pretty easy one to get filled out. On the right-hand side of the screen here is the MFL cutting notice. This is much more involved. It has a lot of different information, endangered resources, water quality concerns, archaeological, historical resources, soil conservation practices. And then on the second page of it is really, getting into the details of the cutting prescription, exactly what's being cut on the property, paired with a map showing which areas of the property are being cut. Really, there needs to be, enough information on that notice to be able to read it and clearly understand what's going on that property and see the map on where that corresponds with on the property. So it can get quite involved, and there again, this is where having a forestry professional or a cooperating forester can help fill these cutting notices out. I was going to mention on the cutting notice too, when it comes time to sign off on it, there is a tab on there where it asks for DNR approval authority or not. If you want DNR approval authority, make sure that you check that box. In some circumstances, the DNR has to approve it regardless. If you're working with a cooperating forester or a forester that has the expertise and years of service, they might check that there is no approval authority. So if you want DNR approval authority, just make sure that you check that box, which will be right by the signature page. And actually you would initial that box, putting in your initials. So step 6, submitting the MFL cutting report. This is after everything would be completed. And mention this, we need to report the species and product. And this will close out the timber sale and then send this to the tax law forestry specialist. I will note on this, there is no longer yield tax associated with this. That was abolished in 2017. But however, we still do need to report the volumes by product and species. It's kind of nice now this form has been revised. It's just total volume. It used to be by legal description by 40. Now it's just total volume on that sale. So that simplified that some. And if you have any questions filling that out, you can contact the tax law forestry specialist. But that form will eventually go to them, and that lets the tax law forestry specialist know the sale's been completed, and the plan needs to be updated and close it out the sale. So here is the link to the UW Extension Forestry website and really some great information on timber sale contracts. Highly suggest going through, print off and look at that sample contract, and then also read through some of these clips and different things here, different tabs on timber sale contracts. Really is good information on that. I mentioned some publications that we have. So UW Extension, there's a link on the left-hand side to UW Extension publications. Lots of really good information here as well. Talking about management, different stuff, firewood, even wildlife stuff, herbicides. Lots of really good information on there that you can go through. And then the link on the right would be DNR publications, and that would be the link that I mentioned earlier, the 7 successful steps to successful timber harvest. That publication would be under that link, and I would suggest looking through that. Lauren, I believe we'll be sending a link to following up with, or an email, excuse me, with these links that you guys will have access to that then following this meeting. So just to review next steps, find your MFL plan, review it, work with a forestry or cooperating forester or other forestry professional, get something in writing, then contact your tax law forestry specialist, let them know that you have a service agreement, timber sale contract. And yeah, really contact tax law forestry specialists anytime along the way with questions, concerns that pop up. And filing your MFL county cutting notices, and lastly, submitting that MFL cutting report that'll close out the timber sale.